Send in the cleanup crew. As I sit here and take in all of the news from every direction, all I see is deceivers, liars, corporate media, cover-ups, agenda, all pushing the same propaganda. It's time for a game changer, a visionary, an innovative person who changes the way that people think of the situations. It's time for Game Changer TV, telling it like it is. Get in the game. Thank you for tuning in to Game Changer TV. I'm your host, Terri Lynn, and this is the channel where every day we're telling it like it is. Today is May 25th, 2025, and today we're going to talk about the cleanup crew and to point out the truth that the scripture says. Don't put your trust in the confidence of a man. Don't trust in the arm of the flesh. Scripture says in the last days that evil and wicked men will become worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. So that means people that you think you can trust will be deceivers. And so we're going to talk about deception, how people can be compromised, how people can change their positions, how people can put on a different mask to accomplish whatever they are assigned to do. Choices are going to have to be made on who you think is truthful, where you think the truth is. And the truth is only in the Word of God. This is a time like never before to put our confidence in God because people are deceivers. Even Trump is a deceiver, and he is sending in his cleanup crew to salvage his reputation and to get people off of his back. Wait till we get into this. Are y'all ready? Are y'all ready to hear the truth? If you're on the Trump train, I ask that you put your emotions to the side and logically listen to what I'm saying. Let's get into this. What is the meaning of the phrase, the heat is on? The heat is on means that there is intense pressure or scrutiny on someone or a situation. It implies a need to act quickly, perform well, or face the consequences. The expression suggests that the stakes are high and the situation is becoming more demanding. And when you are a political leader, and the heat is on, you've got to send in people to deflect from the heat. This is from Eyewitness News 7, ABC 7, from March 20th, 2025, 2 months ago. The Department of Justice, pressured by Trump supporters, pushes the FBI to release more of the Epstein files. Because y'all remember in February, the month prior, heavily redacted information on the Epstein files were released, and people were disappointed that nothing became of that. Then the DOJ started feeling pressured by the MAGA people and the Trump supporters, and they were pushing the FBI to give them more information. But you know that old saying, be careful what you wish for? This might be one of those situations. A cover-up. What is a cover-up? A cover-up is an attempt, whether successful or not, to conceal evidence of wrongdoing. Now, whose names are they protecting by this heavily redacted Epstein list? Who is being protected? What is the cover-up? Why the need for a cleanup crew? Well, let's get into it. And the heat is on, and the DOJ is being pressured to release information that the FBI was withholding. Let's get into this. In politics, a cleanup person is also the fixer. In politics and industry, their fixer or the cleanup people, their tasks range from public relation crisis management to campaign strategy to the judicious wielding of clout. In politics, a cleanup person refers to someone who is tasked with dealing with the aftermath of a situation, often a scandal or a crisis, to protect the reputation or interest of an individual or president or an organization. Now, the pressure's been on to release this client list and the flight logs and information related to the Epstein case. The cleanup people. A cleanup person refers to someone who is tasked with dealing with the aftermath of a situation, often a scandal or a crisis, to protect the reputation or interest of an individual. Now, who is being protected? Are y'all ready? Who are the cleanup people? Trump named loyalist Kash Patel as the FBI director to help with effort to upend law enforcement. Trump names MAGA loyalist podcaster Dan Bongino as the deputy FBI director. Now, we all watched the Dan Bongino show. We all heard him talking about how much he loved the president. We heard him say that he wished he wouldn't have taken the vaccine. We all listened to him. I did for a while, but then something wasn't sitting right with me, so I skedaddled, okay? But Trump has appointed 2 high-ranking loyalists to protect him at the FBI. Wait till y'all see this. And the DOJ was being pressured by the FBI to release. The DOJ was being pressured to release the information that the FBI was withholding concerning the Epstein situation. Now we have 2 Trump loyalists that are at the head of the FBI, and people trusted Dan Bongino. And in February, the Nothing Burger files were heavily redacted that released concerning the Epstein situation. The DOJ was pressured by the Trump supporters, pushing the FBI to release more of the Epstein files, which brings us to be careful what you wish for. The item, be careful what you wish for, advises people to think about the potential consequences of their desires before making a wish. It suggests that what you wish for might not be as beneficial or as enjoyable as you anticipated, and could even lead to negative outcomes. Why did Dan Bongino flip his position? Y'all listen to this.
Listen, that Jeffrey Epstein story is a big deal. Please do not let that story go. Keep your eye on this. Catherine Rumler, we need to keep the heat on this case, folks. There are a lot of people who are knee deep in the Washington swamp who are not telling you the truth about serious allegations out there that Epstein may have had video and audio of people out there doing things they shouldn't have been doing. And you should be asking yourself the question, how is it that all these people, the CIA director, the Obama fixer, Bill Clinton, all intersected paths with Jeffrey Epstein? Jeffrey Epstein isn't with us anymore, and nobody seems to want to talk about it, outside of a few entrepreneurial media outlets saying, hey, this is a big deal.
He killed himself. You want me to get, I've seen the whole file.
Look, it's clear with Pam Bondi and what's going on here that the administration is lying to us. And a lot of people are confused as to why.
So Kash Patel and Dan Bongino speculate that Jeffrey Poopstein didn't unalive himself for years. And then they get in there and they're like, nah, he did. Trust us. Bro, excuse me, what? First, I'd like to say I like these 2 guys and I'd rather them in there than anybody else, but are we supposed to just be cool with this? And look, I hope they release more information, but I'm just not going to bank on it because I've been getting disappointed by believing that for the last 120 days. But look, as far as I'm concerned, until I see a little bit more evidence that these guys are so sure of this, I'm not feeling good about them just being like, yeah, he did. Bro. Because what really bothers me is that these 2 guys that are objectively more connected to the highest halls of power than anybody in the general public, 99.9% of people, and they speculated about the validity of this story for years. And then they get into the halls of power, and in a couple of months, they're just like, nope, I'm certain of it. Certain of it, because to me, the real details of this case basically equates to lightning striking the same place 3 times. So according to the forensic pathologist, he breaks his hyoid bone, commonly associated with strangulation, as opposed to what they say he did. Multiple cameras near a high-profile inmate malfunctioned, or the camera footage was accidentally deleted or missing. 2 guards allegedly fell asleep for hours and then falsified records that they had been checking on him the whole time. Despite this being perhaps one of the most high-profile and interconnected to the halls of power all around the world inmates in recent U.S. history, he was placed in the often understaffed and dysfunctional correctional facility that he ended up not leaving. He was allegedly found unresponsive in his cell at 6:30 in the morning, and apparently rigor mortis had already set in, yet he wasn't declared actually dead until 90 minutes later at the hospital. No photos were taken of him in the position that he was allegedly in either, which would be protocol in that situation. The photos of the cell seemed pretty staged looking and kind of chaotic, especially if he was allegedly alone in there. And that's maybe half of the unsolved irregularities specifically around the end of life, not even considering all the rest. They tell us that when they get in there, they're going to release the photos around all of the sketchy things that occurred, and it's been over 100 whatever days, and we haven't seen that. And then both Kash and Bongino speculate about this death for years before they get in there, which seems highly credible considering the people they're connected to and ultimately the positions they ended up in. And then the best we get 120 days into the term is some interview on Fox News like, nah, he did it for sure. Bro, what do you mean though? And look, I want to make it clear, I'm going to give these guys more time. I like them. I'd rather them be in there than not. But if you give me 99 Italian clubs and 1 shit sandwich, you gave me a shit sandwich, dude. Look, I'm going to give it time. But if you helped theorize for multiple years that something was not as it seems, and then you get in there and the best you say is, nah, it is. We saw it. Bro, you got to do better than that, dude. Is anybody else with me on this? Like, am I crazy for thinking this way? Because, like, I know what people are going to say, like, oh, they're doing such great work with X, Y, and Z. And yes, I agree with that. But that comment just doesn't sit right with me. That's all.
This is from 11 years ago. Dan Bongino was running for, I think, running for Senate as a senator for Maryland. So he was on the Glenn Beck show. So let's get a little bit of his background so we know who he is going forward in this video.
He's running for Congress in Maryland, but I met him when he was still working as a Secret Service agent and protecting this president, and he is full of honor.
So his job was to protect the president. He served under Obama and Bush, and his job was to protect the president. Is he protecting the president again? Is this why he got called up to serve in this position? Let's start this clip back.
Maryland, but I met him when he was still working as a Secret Service agent and protecting this president, and he is full of honor. And he protected the last president as well, Dan Bongino, running for Congress in Maryland. And not because you want to, but because of the things that you've seen and the things that you know. Tell me what you think is happening with the government is being used as a weapon to destroy people right now.
Yeah, we're in a lot of trouble. The president sees government, and I think it's because of his lack of experience and maybe community organizing in the past is like this shiny new toy, which for all the disagreements I had with Clinton, Carter, and Bush, there were always limits. There was that line you just didn't cross. We cross it seemingly every day,
Every day.
We're lost in the scandals. The Jamie Dimon shakedown at Chase.
This was under Obama.
The HHS scandal, Kathleen Sebelius shaking down the healthcare industry for money. The IRS. It's to the point, Glenn, where these scandals in and of themselves would be huge, backbreaking scandals, are just lost in the scandal fog. In this administration, it's worse than people know.
So knowing what you know, tell me what we should be concerned about.
You give the government information, it will be abused. It is not a matter of if it'll be abused.
And what did Trump and Doge and Elon Musk just do? They just got everybody's data. They got everybody's information. Dan Bongino was warning 11 years ago, you give the government all the data and there's going to be problems. Where do you think we're at right now?
Matter of if it'll be abused. Keep in mind, it's only a matter of when. And keep in mind, as you well know, libertarian streak is strong here. When the line between the personal self and the public self, which you choose when you hit your garage door open in the morning, you act differently in public than everybody does. When that line is determined by the government that keeps your information in a trove for release anytime they need it, How are you free?
The president is telling us that that is not being stored, that stuff is not being stored.
Right. They also told us that it wasn't being used for personal use till we found that employees, some of them at the NSA, were spying on their girlfriends and boyfriends.
Make the case, Dan, because this is what people will say. I have nothing to hide.
We all have something to hide, Glenn. I know you're a believer. I'm a Christian. Jesus Christ, as far as I know, was the only perfect human being to ever plant his feet on this earth. We are all doing something wrong. The catch is not if we're doing something wrong. Are your private wrongs impacting on my civil liberties? If not, the government has no business in your life. We're all doing, it's a red herring. If you're not doing something wrong, the question is only when your private wrongs that had no effect on anyone else become exposed for the government's benefit.
First of all, you can't keep up with the regulation. The healthcare regulation, we quoted something on the air literally today on page 35,560.
Yeah.
How do you keep up with that? Everybody's breaking the law someplace.
Right.
You know, the regulations are incredible now. But if you have all of that information, you know, as a Secret Service agent, you know you couldn't just take one piece of information and say, get him. You had to look at everything. And you.
Okay, so there it is. Glenn Beck said you couldn't just make a determination based on one little piece of evidence. You had to look at everything. Was he blackmailed? Did y'all hear how he was whispering, saying, no, Jeffrey Epstein killed himself?
Killed himself. You want me to get, I've seen the whole file.
Look, you had to look at everything, and you could assemble things, could you not?
Yeah.
Could you not assemble
of course.
things? Yeah.
That's what we do. It's only a matter of time before someone slaps an email on your desk that you sent 15 years ago threatening to punch out your neighbor for not pruning his trees and says, look what we got against you. I need your information on whatever. Tony, your other neighbor. What? I thought that was private. Remember, when the key's held by someone else, liberty means absolutely nothing.
So why was Dan Bongino picked? Did some of his imperfections come to light? And was it because Dan Bongino had a large MAGA following? He had a lot of people. He was influential. His podcast was growing. Why was he selected? Did the email plop on his desk? You better come do what you have to do to protect the president. Conservative media personality, former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino picked as FBI deputy director. Now remember, Dan Bongino was a Secret Service agent who guarded Obama. But Democrats slam incoming FBI Deputy Director, Trump ally Dan Bongino. You can go find all kind of images, Dan Bongino guarding President Obama. So Obama was protected with his life by Dan Bongino, but then Democrats turned on him. This is about to get good. Dan Bongino named FBI Deputy Director to end his radio show. Cumulus media syndicated personality Dan Bongino has been appointed as the new Deputy Director of the FBI. President Donald Trump announced his selection of the conservative talker and former Secret Service agent on Sunday night on social media. Great news for law enforcement and American justice. Dan Bongino, a man of incredible love and passion for our country, has been named the next Deputy Director of the FBI by the man who will be the best director, Kash Patel, posted Trump. This is from October 2021. December 27th, 2021. Dan Bongino, the big business of returning Trump to power. So he had a vision. The Secret Service agent turned radio host is furious at liberals, so he's trying to build a right-wing media infrastructure in time for the 2024 election. So was the whole goal a setup to get people behind him like a piped piper that he could lead into to Trump and to follow Trump and get him the vote, because that was his stated goal. Y'all, this is about to get crazy. In politics, does a fixer make negative stories go away on the political leader? In political context, a fixer, also known as the troubleshooter, can sometimes attempt to manage or suppress negative stories about a political leader. This can involve a variety of strategies, including attempting to buy or bury stories, controlling the narrative. He killed himself. I've looked at all the documents. He's killed himself. The fixer can use all these strategies. One, controlling the narrative through public relations, or even engaging more controversial tactics like discrediting sources or manipulating the media. What are they trying to cover up? What are they trying to distract from? Now, in a court of law, all evidence is submitted for the jury to make an opinion on. It might be very unfavorable for your client, but everything, state's evidence, is going to be presented against your client. You know it's coming. You've got to figure out how to deflect it and make it look like your client is innocent of what evidence was submitted against him. Let's look at this evidence submitted against Trump and what they might be trying to clean up by saying that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself to deflect from any further investigation. Just wrapping it up. Yes, he killed himself. There's nothing to investigate. Let's look at this evidence. 2 loyalists have been appointed as the head of the FBI. The FBI was releasing redacted information about the flight logs and everything associated with Jeffrey Epstein. Why? And now Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, who at one time said there's no way that Epstein killed himself, are now whispering, yes, I've looked at all the evidence. Yes, he killed himself. Let's look at this evidence. Now, remember, Trump has said he wasn't friends with Epstein. He didn't know him that well. Just everybody in Palm Beach knew who he was. Let's keep going. Now, we've all seen the pictures of Epstein being taken to the hospital on the stretcher. Now, November 22nd, 2021, I did this video on Epstein. Why are there 4 different official stories on his death? Y'all need to go see that, okay? I don't have time to get in on it, but I paid such good attention to that whole entire situation in 2021. Your mind will be blown on that. But let's keep going. So we saw a picture of him on the gurney being taken into the hospital. And this is from August 14th, 2019, from The Sun out of the UK. Dead at the scene. Now, y'all think about that. We just saw a picture of him being wheeled into the hospital on a gurney. They made it clear so we could see his face and believe their narrative, okay, that this was Jeffrey Epstein going into the hospital. But this article said he was dead at the scene. Now, why would you have a dead person on a gurney and not in a body bag? Okay, because he was dead on the scene. How dead was he? Jeffrey Epstein may have been dead for 2 hours in his cell before being found, despite officials saying he later died in the hospital. So they're going to put a man who's been dead for 2 hours and rigor mortis had already set in. You're going to put a man in rigor mortis who's been dead for 2 hours on full display and not in a body bag. Really? Let's keep going. That was just a photo op right there to let y'all know, oh, see, he's dead. He's dead. We're letting y'all know. And I showed y'all it didn't look like him at all. That does not look like Jeffrey Epstein. I said that looked like more like Sandusky than Jeffrey Epstein. Let's keep going. Did rigor mortis set in on Epstein? Yes, rigor mortis did set in on Jeffrey Epstein's body after his death. October 2019, Jeffrey Epstein's injuries, Miami Herald, look more like murder than suicide. NPR, Jeffrey Epstein's family hired an expert. A forensic pathologist hired by Jeffrey Epstein's family said he believes Epstein's autopsy suggests homicide rather than suicide. But they're making sure to show us that, does that look like Epstein in any kind of way? But they're making sure to show us a picture of Epstein being taken into the hospital, who was dead in his cell for 2 hours with rigor mortis set in, but he's not in a body bag. And then Dan Bongino gets his own radio show, gets his entire audience of MAGA supporters behind him. He's saying be suspicious about this whole Jeffrey Epstein story. Then he talked about people in the business could be compromised, that an email could fall on your desk, and you got to do what you have to do. Then he changes his story. Yes, I've looked at all the evidence. Epstein has killed himself. Then he and another Trump loyalist are appointed to sell the lie, to be the cleanup people, to make everything go away, make everything look hunky-dory. When Trump's Attorney General Pam Bondi was supposedly going to release all the information and everything was heavily redacted, and then now Kash Patel and Bongino come out and say he killed himself, that's to make everything go away. That's to end any further investigation. Y'all, let's just put it to rest. The man killed himself. There's nothing to look into, because they're trying to protect who would be involved in this. Trump once praised terrific guy Epstein, who likes women on the younger side. Now think about this. Trump was friends with a guy who he knew liked girls on the young side. And now he comes up supposedly dead, or was he just given a new identity and sent somewhere else because he could take a lot of people down and they don't want anything to be looked into? Did he get a new identity, and is he off living somewhere else? And they don't want an investigation into this. Just let it die. Docs.house.gov. Listen to the Jeffrey Epstein tapes. I was Donald Trump's closest friend. Explosive tapes recorded by author Michael Wolff show Epstein claiming that Donald Trump liked to blank his friends' wives and first slept with Melania on the Lolita Express. And there's rumors that they were introduced by him. Jeffrey Epstein described himself. Now, this is from docs.house.gov. Jeffrey Epstein, these are the tapes they have. Epstein described himself as Trump's closest friend and claimed intimate knowledge of his proclivity for sex, including his best friends, according to recordings obtained exclusively by the Daily Beast. The convicted, even boasted of his closeness to Trump and his now wife Melania by claiming first time he slept with her was on my plane. Now, if you were Trump and this was your party friend, would you want any investigations to go away? So you send your two new closest confidants out there to the public and say, y'all look away from this Jeffrey Epstein thing. There's nothing to see here. Okay? Everything's been heavily redacted. Pam Bondi didn't release anything. The FBI hasn't released anything. It's all redacted, but we've looked into it. He killed himself. Go away. And there's evidence. And are y'all ready for this? February 28th, 2025, from People. Donald Trump named in Jeffrey Epstein's flight logs released by his own attorney general. This is from People magazine. According to the logs, Trump flew with his then wife, Marla Maples, his second wife, and daughter Tiffany with Epstein twice. President Donald Trump names appears in Jeffrey Epstein's flight logs released by his own attorney general on February 27th. People reviewed the flight logs and found Trump's name a total of 7 times. He was mentioned on page 24 of the first flight log dated October 11, 1993. He was also mentioned twice on page 27, along with his then wife, Marla Maples, and their daughter, Tiffany Trump, and a nanny, May 15, 1994. All of these dates had J.E., Jeffrey Epstein, listed on the same flights as Trump. GM, possibly Ghislaine Maxwell, was listed as a passenger on the October 1993 flight. The release of the files related to the financier accused of sex trafficking came a day after Attorney General Pam Bondi said on Fox that the Justice Department was set to release flight logs and names of people associated with Epstein. Now, where are the arrests? Bondi said that Jeffrey Epstein had more than 250 alleged victims. Well, where are the 250 predators? Okay? Not one single arrest. Not one single arrest. With Donald Trump's best friend at one time. 250 victims that Don and Melania hung around him. Don and Marla Maples hung around him with their child. 250 victims. Donald Trump says this man liked his girls on the younger side. 250 victims and not one single arrest. And now the official government position on this Epstein case is that he committed suicide. Let everything go away. What do they have on Dan Bongino to make him have changed his position? And look at his face. He looks like he got that email on his desk.
That Jeffrey Epstein story is a big deal. Please do not let that story go. Keep your eye on this. Catherine Rumler, we need to keep the heat on this case, folks. There are a lot of people who are knee deep in the Washington swamp who are not telling you the truth about serious allegations out there that Epstein may have had video and audio of people out there doing things they shouldn't have been doing. And you should be asking yourself the question, how is it that all these people, the CIA director, the Obama fixer, Bill Clinton, all intersected paths with Jeffrey Epstein? Jeffrey Epstein isn't with us anymore, and nobody seems to want to talk about it. Outside of a few entrepreneurial media outlets saying, hey, this is a big deal.
And now Dan Bongino don't want to talk about it. Now he's seen all the evidence. There's nothing to talk about.
He killed himself. You want me to get? I've seen the whole file.
And now Ben Shapiro is getting on this situation.
Dan Bongino said, "Listen, despite all the speculation,
so now Ben Shapiro is getting on this. He is circling the wagons. He's telling people, y'all can trust Dan Bongino. If there's anybody that can be trusted, it's Dan Bongino. So now he is trying to fill in the gaps also and saying, y'all don't look at anything else. Dan Bongino said it. He's the gospel. He can't be compromised. He can't be blackmailed. And he's saying Epstein killed himself.
Bongino said, listen, despite all the speculation, Jeffrey Epstein did in fact kill himself. Okay, I'll tell you why I like this. The reason I like this is because I'm not a big fan of just pure speculation. I too have played the did Epstein kill himself game because, pretty suspicious. But I believe Dan Bongino. I don't believe he's lying for the deep state. If there's one person who can be trusted not to lie for the deep state, in fact, it would be Dan Bongino. Here was Dan saying a truthful thing.
Listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself. You want me to get, I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
Yeah, good for Dan Bongino. This is one of the reasons I like having Dan Bongino in there, is because you know Dan ain't going to hide the ball. Dan is not going to lie. Dan Bongino said, listen, despite all the speculation, Jeffrey Epstein did in fact kill himself. Okay, I'll tell you why I like this.
Now, the woman from Fox who was interviewing Kash Patel and Dan Bongino is Maria Bartiromo. And who is she? Who is she? Y'all, she is affiliated with the World Economic Forum. She is a globalist who's interviewing Dan Bongino that Ben Shapiro is saying you can trust him. Maria is a graduate of New York University, 2014, joined Fox Business, currently anchor of Global Markets editor, anchors Morning with Maria, Fox Business News. Look at who she is, y'all. Look at who she is. Ben Shapiro is trying to tell you to trust this whole process. Maria Bartiromo is a member of the Board of Trustees of New York University, the Board of Directors of the Young Global Leaders of the World Economic Forum, and on the Council of Foreign Relations. And she's up there, a World Economic Forum young global leader, is interviewing these, quote, two Trump loyalists who Dan Bongino's done a 360, well, 180. He's totally in the other direction. And they are giving this story to a World Economic Forum young global leader who also is on the Council of Foreign Relations. This Jeffrey Epstein thing is a global story, and they're trying to put an end to it. Now, Joe Rogan and Trump. Joe Rogan endorses Trump, calls Trump, and Trump calls him the biggest there is. April 30th, 2025, Trump reacts to Joe Rogan's warning about becoming monsters over deportations and no due process. So Trump is talking about no due process for illegals, just throwing them out of the country with no right to a trial or hearing or nothing like that. And Joe Rogan told his audience of millions on April 17th episode that rounding up gang members and shipping them to El Salvador with no due process was dangerous. We got to be careful that we don't become monsters while we're fighting monsters, Rogan said. So he kind of got into it a little bit with Trump. And this is from Christian Broadcasting Network from May 22nd, 3 days ago. Joe Rogan is reportedly now attending church. So is this try to distance himself to make himself safe? Is this a smokescreen to sound like he can be believable now? There's a lot going on. From today, Times of India, the football great quarterback considered one of the best, Aaron Rodgers sparks outrage by linking the Ellen DeGeneres show set to Epstein's Island Temple. He was on Joe Rogan, and he pointed out the similarities between the two, and Joe Rogan dismissed it.
Yeah, buddy.
Look at it.
Oh, well, you know where that is too, right? It's a similar image to that, right?
No.
I know Jamie does.
What is it?
It's on the set of a famous talk show that's now not on anymore.
Oh, Ellen? Was that Ellen?
Yeah.
Really?
Just look at the temple and then look at the...
Let me see Ellen's background. What? Oh, similar. That looks like a building, though. Like
yeah, sure.
Yeah. Is that a building in L.A.? That might be a building in L.A.
That's part of our set.
Right, but I mean, it's supposed to be a background of... Yeah.
It's strange to use the same.
It is, but it's, I mean, it's whatever. I'm not that impressed with that. that could just be coincidental. There's a lot of people.
Ask Alex about that.
Yeah. Well, he'll get. Well.
Is Joe Rogan trying to deflect because he knew Aaron Rodgers was going into a situation he shouldn't be talking about? A fixer is someone who is assigned to or contracted to solve problems for others. This is from The Hill from May 19th, 2025. Kash Patel, Dan Bongino dismissed Epstein conspiracy theories that he killed himself. But was he blackmailed? Was what came up in his skeleton, with his skeletons in the closet? What email fell on his desk? Now, this was from March 21st, 2024, last year, okay? Joe Bongino, and he's the younger brother of Dan Bongino. We're going to get into this, okay? Joseph Bongino is based out of New York and works at the Howard Hughes Corporation as Vice President, Security and Historic District Operations. So he works at Howard Hughes Security, Dan Bongino's brother. I typed in, is Howard Hughes building smart cities? Yes, Howard Hughes Corporation, where Dan Bongino's brother works, is involved in building what they refer to as cities of the future and smart communities by incorporating smart city technologies and data-driven approaches into their master plan communities. Dan Bongino's brother is involved in smart cities. And now he's been tapped by Trump to be a cleanup person, being interviewed by a World Economic Forum young globalist leader who works for the Club of Rome. Do y'all see the smoke screens? Do y'all see the liars deceiving and being deceived? Well, in 2012, Dan Bongino's brother Joe, who now works at the Howard Hughes Corporation, who wants to build smart cities, his brother Joe was also a Secret Service agent that was caught in a prostitution ring scandal in Colombia.
Yesterday, we talked about the scandal with former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino, who's also now running for the U.S. Senate in Maryland. We spoke with him because he had spoken to a number of the agents who were directly involved, and we asked him what they had told him. After the interview, we learned that his brother was with the Secret Service detail in Colombia. I spoke with Mr. Bongino yesterday on the phone in the afternoon, asking him about his brother's involvement. He said while he is helping the investigation, he is not a target of the investigation.
March 25th, 2013, from the Washingtonian. Secret Service prostitution scandal 1 year later. That wild night in Cartagena rocked the elite Secret Service and embarrassed the White House. Was it a one-time incident or part of a pattern of agents behaving badly? Says about 10 other Secret Service agents joined Huntington, that was the lady, including Joe Bongino, who was also married. Huntington and Bongino worked together on the agency's counter-assault team. These are marksmen whose job is to stop an attack on the president when he's in public. Agents say that the bonds among CAT members are extraordinarily tight, even within the famous fraternal Secret Service. As Huntington flirted with Cerez, Bongino took an eye to her friend. Eventually, they paired off and headed to the back of the hotel a couple of miles away. It is not clear if one knew that it was an escort. One of the women banged on the door of Bongino's room, where her friend, who didn't ask to be paid, had spent the night. Cerez demanded that Joe Bongino come up with the money to pay her. She said that she threatened to call the police and that Joe Bongino pleaded with her not to. He eventually went from room to room asking his Secret Service brothers for scouts, the term they use for local currency or any other U.S. dollars they could spare. Joe Bongino came up with $250 in mixed currency and gave it to her. During the commotion, the Colombian police officer, apparently stationed on the hotel floor, inquired about the argument and told Joe Bongino he should pay the woman. There are conflicting accounts about whether the police officer was advocating for Suarez or merely suggesting to Joe Bongino that he give her the money to keep her quiet. As the hotel was taking stock of the damages, the head of security for the Caribbean called the U.S. Embassy to report that a Colombian police officer had intervened in an altercation between a Secret Service agent, Joe Bongino, and a local prostitute. The fuse was lit. So y'all tell me what's going on. Did an email fall on Dan Bongino's lap about other stuff in his past that we don't know about with his family? Why did he completely change on, y'all, this is a serious story with Jeffrey Epstein, don't let it go away. Then he gets a call from Trump to be his deputy FBI chief, and he took it. Let's keep going. So I don't know the date on this clip, but she's asking if Trump appointed him to be the head of the FBI, would he do it? But instead, he's become the deputy chief of the FBI. But listen to what he says.
I've been seeing people float you as the next FBI director. Would you do it?
Would I do it? Only if President Trump personally wanted it. Oh, him, if he wanted it. I've never envisioned myself going back in government again, ever. Like ever, ever, ever. I can't say that enough. Repeating decimal, right? But, you know, there comes a time where I wouldn't even take a salary for this stuff. There comes a time where, you know, your country matters more. And I never got in this stuff for the money or the glory or any crap like that. It just happened. And yeah, it's just, I'm honored that people think that. But yeah, I'm kind of flattered. If he called that, I'd have to consider anything.
We've been seeing.
No matter who gets elected, the Epstein videos remain secret.
Wait, what are you talking about? I thought we could all sleep well at night now knowing that Epstein legitimately killed himself, right?
What was that?
Did that just come out?
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide.
You know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself.
You weren't convinced by that?
No.
Why?
I've dug into that, and it's just so spooky. I mean, how do you charge a guy with sex trafficking when there's no end users that have been charged? Who did he traffic to?
What do you think that was?
What do I think it was?
Yeah.
I think it was a blackmail operation. What do you think it was?
I think it was a blackmail operation run by the CIA and the Israeli intel services, and probably others. You know, French intelligence always has a hand in everything, I've noticed. Probably them too. The usual darkest forces in the world colluding to make rich and powerful people obey their agenda.
Listen, that Jeffrey Epstein story is a big deal. Please do not let that story go. Keep your eye on this. Catherine Rumler, we need to keep the heat on this case, folks. There are a lot of people who are knee deep in the Washington swamp who are not telling you the truth about serious allegations out there that Epstein may have had video and audio of people out there doing things they shouldn't have been doing. And you should be asking yourself the question, how is it that all these people, the CIA director, the Obama fixer, Bill Clinton, all intersected paths with Jeffrey Epstein? Jeffrey Epstein isn't with us anymore, and nobody seems to want to talk about it. May have had video and audio of people out there doing things they shouldn't have been doing. And you should be asking yourself the question, how is it that all these people, the CIA director, the Obama fixer, Bill Clinton, all intersected paths with Jeffrey Epstein? Jeffrey Epstein isn't with us anymore, and nobody seems to want to talk about it. Outside of a few entrepreneurial media outlets saying, hey, this is a big deal.
He killed himself. You want me to get, I've seen the whole file.
Look, it's clear.
When you're in that kind of confinement, we call it solitary confinement, you're not supposed to have these things that you are able to hang yourself with. That's the whole point of the strict rules in there. You're not supposed to have 6 feet of cloth that you can dangle from the ceiling so you can hang yourself. This is prison 101.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. this doesn't look right. It doesn't look like a suicide. But is this Justice Department going to investigate it? Probably not.
Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, who we all had high hopes for, they all said that they were going to go after the people, Jeffrey Epstein, and release all the transparency at the FBI. Here's what Kash Patel said. This is 3 years ago.
And look at some of the comments in this. One nation under blackmail. Dan Bongino proves that anyone can be bought, robbed, or threatened once they enter the land of the swamp. You can tell by the look on Bongino's face that he's lying. No integrity. Ridiculous. Why haven't there been any arrests? Traitors, both of them. Biggest disappointment of the entire administration. I followed Dan Bongino for years. I thought he was our guy. You can tell by his body language he's not being honest. Never thought Bongino and Kash would fold. They clearly folded on Epstein, and there is no coming back from that. They both need to be removed. They didn't shut up for 4 years and folded in a few weeks. Two men that I had the highest hopes for in this current administration turned out to be complete disappointments, either sellouts or pathetic cowards. Whatever the case, I do not have a shred of respect for, nor any trust in them.
Did Jeffrey Epstein transparency at the FBI? Here's what Kash Patel said. This is 3 years ago.
Did Jeffrey Epstein kill himself? Who killed Jeffrey Epstein? How about that?
Let me talk about, so I've spent a lot of time in federal detention facilities as a public defender before, talking to my clients, so I kind of know how those work. He was in isolation. He was in a unit where he's in there not just to protect himself. In these units, there's supposed to be 24/7 guard duty on him directly. And from what I was able to learn in this, in the lead up to his suicide, is the guard fell asleep. Now, I don't really buy that, but it's almost impossible to prove otherwise unless you can obtain the videotape. And usually there isn't video looking into people's cells for a lot of reasons. And so we're stuck with that narrative. And do you know what happened to these guards? Supposedly they were going to get charged, but I've never heard anything that happened to these prison guards. Maybe we should try to find them and let's talk to them.
Yeah, it's like the Andy Griffith thing, right? He falls asleep with his feet up on the desk, and then the key, you remember that they reach around and they grab the keys and they make their way out of the jail so they can go back to the saloon. I mean, it seems really ridiculous to me that the media wants us to believe that this is actually what happened.
And also, when you're in that kind of confinement, we call it solitary confinement, you're not supposed to have these things that you are able to hang yourself with. That's the whole point of the strict rules in there. You're not supposed to have 6 feet of cloth that you can dangle from the ceiling so you can hang yourself. This is prison 101. Yeah. So I agree with you. This doesn't look right. It doesn't look like a suicide. But is this Justice Department going to investigate it? Probably not.
So the media is desperate to attach Trump, like you said.
So now he is the Justice Department. Now he is the head of the FBI. And now here he is being asked in Congress, did Jeffrey Epstein kill himself?
Did Jeffrey Epstein hang himself or did somebody kill him?
Senator, I believe he hung himself in a cell in the Metropolitan Detention Center.
Are you going to release all the information about that?
Senator, we are working through that right now with the Department of Justice.
When do you think you'll have it done, Kash?
I think in the near future, sir.
Oh, like before I die?
Senator, we've been working on that, and we're doing it in a way that protects victims and also doesn't put out into the ether.
Really? So the reason why you're slow walking all this, and remember he was all gung ho about, let's talk about those. Who are the victims that you're protecting? Then the FBI can't release this information about Jeffrey Epstein's suicide. Are the victims the sleeping guards? The people, the agents who snuck in and actually murdered him? Who are the victims that you're protecting? Because you sounded 3 years ago like you were really gung-ho on interviewing those guards and prosecuting them, or at least talking to them. Where are they? How come you're not parading them on TV? How come you're not talking and telling me you're talking to them? Where is it? So This is not what people voted for. Again, another thing. So as soon as they get power, they immediately flip. He went on with Maria Bartiromo and so she presses them whether Epstein truly killed himself. And watch this. Watch this.
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the metro.
You mean your opinion? It was your opinion. That used to be your opinion. And now you are actually in a position of power to investigate it. But again, it'll probably expose Israel, and it'll probably expose the criminals actually running inside the Justice Department doing the bidding of Israel.
Or somebody other than Israel that they're hired to protect. That was on the flight. That was his best friend.
Now we can't. Whatever. Now, here we go. Let's watch it again.
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself. You want me to? I've seen the whole file.
Gaslighting.
He killed himself.
I know it's hard work.
Boy, what a pushback by Maria Bartiromo. I know it's hard work. That's your follow-up?
Because she's World Economic Forum Young Global Leaders Council on Foreign Relations. It's all a joke.
I know it's hard work. That's her follow-up. I know it's hard work.
Did they both find a dead horse head in their bed?
Yes. Sounds like it. Sounds like they woke up with a severed horse head in their bed. That's what it sounds like. So that is beyond disappointing. That is suspicious. And again, another promise not kept. Another promise not kept. He said he was going to reveal the Epstein's black book on day one. He's going to have complete transparency. And now here they are pushing the same establishment lie that Jeffrey Epstein somehow magically he hung himself all of a sudden. He was able to break his own neck. Yeah, okay. Okay.
I want to play, Rob. If you can play this clip of Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, the two of them, they're sitting there being asked about Epstein. I don't know if you have this clip or not. There's a clip of the two of them. Maybe we'll play this one and then Stephen A. Smith, and we'll wrap it up. Do you know which one I'm talking about,
Yep,
Rob?
I have it right here.
So if you can play this clip. So they're being asked about Epstein, and then Dan answers as well. Go ahead and please. I'm going to get the team's reaction here. Go for it.
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself. You want me to? I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
I know it's hard work.
Well, I guess case closed, guys.
Okay, guess what?
I guess we figured it out.
I love Dan Bongino. Dan Bongino looks like he didn't want to. He killed himself. Killed him. I don't
How
know.
much do you believe them, Vinny?
Adam.
Kash
they
Patel.
work for the intelligence
Dan
community.
Bongino, high credibility
Listen,
in your
how
eyes,
about this?
right?
Anything that
What
has to do
percentage
with the
do you believe
Epstein,
him?
I don't even know what the hell to believe from anybody anymore. And to be honest with you, killed himself, whatever. I don't, at this point.
86'd himself.
Exactly, thank you. I don't care. Do you know what I care about? Ghislaine Maxwell and all the people that she knows and all the customers and all the 10,000, by the way, tens of thousands of hours of Epstein and his people having sex with underage children. Where are I want arrests. I want those people. Kill himself, that's okay. We're not stupid. We know what happened. If they say he killed himself, whatever. Maybe they gave him an ultimatum, Adam. Maybe they're like, hey, listen, we're going to shut the cameras off. You at least better do it or else it's going to be hell or high water for you. So maybe, I don't know. I don't care at this point. I want the customers. I want the people that were at that island. I want the people that were on those tapes. I want them exposed. This doesn't do anything for me. I don't believe anybody anymore. I don't. I actually don't.
I mean,
that's what I want. That's what I think the people want. I think everybody out there wants to know who are the people that were there. If Ghislaine Maxwell is in jail for selling and sex trafficking girls, human beings, where are all the customers? You can't arrest Tom for being a drug kingpin and no other arrests are made. It doesn't make any sense. This I don't care about. I don't
that
care.
was a close one.
Yeah.
Don't expose me.
Yeah. But
You don't care about that Jeffrey Epstein
kill himself, Adam, because you know what, Adam? We're never gonna know. We're not, all the stuff that
Look,
lined up. The cameras were off. The guard was
Yeah,
gone.
exactly.
His cellmate was on. I don't care. We're never gonna find out. I want the people that were hooking up with kids.
So let's hear this guy again so I can tie it in with the next article.
So Kash Patel and Dan Bongino speculate that Jeffrey Poopstein didn't unalive himself for years, and then they get in there and they're like, nah, he did. Trust us. Bro, excuse me, what? First, I'd like to say I like these two guys and I'd rather them in there than anybody else, but are we supposed to just be cool with this?
This was from CNN from March 22nd, 2025. The FBI's weekend homework: redact the Epstein files. The FBI agents are working around the clock, some in 12-hour overnight shifts on a frenzied mission this week. The urgent work isn't an impending national security threat, but instead reviewing documents and other evidence in the investigation of accused sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein to make redactions before the Justice Department releases them publicly. Agents have been ordered to set aside investigations, including some related to threats from China and Iran, to help complete the redactions. Every division in the Bureau has been ordered to provide agents to the calls, including those who work on criminal and national security matters. This weekend, agents in the Washington field office are spending hours on redaction duty, people briefed on the matter say. And then Bondi comes out and says she was misled on the Epstein documents. Attorney General Pam Bondi was duped into thinking she had all the files related to the investigations into disgraced financier, convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. And remember, she said she was going to release all of it? Hyped release of Epstein files sparks anger and disappointment on the right. The Jeffrey Epstein case has long been an obsession of those who are convinced that the names of prominent figures involved in his sex trafficking network have been kept secret. Listen to Glenn Greenwald.
When Jeffrey Epstein finally was arrested and people thought he was finally going to be put on trial, we were finally going to have transparency, and instead he ended up dying with the prison claiming that he committed suicide. A lot of people were understandably doubtful about that because you're talking about a high profile prisoner in a federal prison. And understandably, people were skeptical of the claim that he actually committed suicide. People thought, well, I think there's a good possibility that he was probably murdered. And among the people who have been suggesting that and raising that very vocally for many years are Kash Patel, who was a conservative pundit, somebody who had worked in the government, was very admired among the American right, and also Dan Bongino, who became one of the most popular pundits anywhere. And at some point, we're going to find the video for you, a stash of it. She called a bunch of conservative influencers and commentators to the White House. They all raved around the Epstein files, part 1. And as it turned out, it was a complete debacle and humiliation because there wasn't a single document in this binder that hadn't already been made publicly available through reporting, through trials, through all kinds of process. Not a single document, no revelations. And so then people started to ask, wait a minute, what's going on here? Like, what? You repeatedly, vocally promised, all of you who were in the Trump administration, that you would release the Epstein files. Like, what's going on? Where are they? And this got inflamed this week because of comments by Kash Patel and Dan Bongino when they went on Fox News. and were asked explicitly, did Jeffrey Epstein kill himself? And this is what they said.
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself. You want me to get, I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
Now, you can make your own judgments about their body posture, their demeanor, or whatever. I particularly don't think they looked entirely comfortable, but that might just be because they know that their most ardent supporters don't believe Jeffrey Epstein killed himself and are going to want to see the proof. They're saying, we read the file. Well, why haven't we read the file? Why haven't we, the public, seen the file? If there's such definitive evidence that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself and it convinced you, where is that? And it's particularly notable because, as I said, both Dan Bongino and Kash Patel have been along raising the questions that other people have. Here, for example, is Dan Bongino speaking to Tim Pool on his podcast in May of 2023.
About a year and a half after that, I'm in a green room at Fox, and I'm not going to say who because they didn't give me permission to share it, but the short story, but not who they are. It says, you know, Epstein's an intelligence asset for people in the Middle East, right? I'm like, no, I didn't know that. I'm like, you sure that? The person, let's say, is like, I'm absolutely sure of that he's either a witting or unwitting asset, intelligence asset, meaning his plane and that island, the cameras, there's a big assumption out there that these videotapes were exclusively in the custody of Epstein. That's a huge mistake. The reason they wanted this story to go away is because there's an assumption like, oh yeah, Epstein had him. No, he wasn't the only one who had him, according to this source. These assets, that's why this blackmail story makes so much sense. Which Middle Eastern countries they are, I don't know, but this person who is a very, very good reporter, I mean, aces, right, swore Epstein was either a witting or unwitting intelligence asset, and they may have had his plane wired up, and they're the ones who have all this stuff. So the point is, to sum it up, how do you know some of these countries aren't going to some of these power players who aren't making decisions because, hey, you wouldn't want this video out there, right?
People who might not want other tapes to get released.
Really think we need the answer to is exactly what Dan Bongino said there that people have been talking about for a long time. Did Jeffrey Epstein work with or for foreign intelligence agents, foreign intelligence agencies? Was this some kind of scam to lure elites into compromising positions so the foreign intelligence agencies could have that on them? Compromising information? It's always been a question like, where did Jeffrey Epstein's vast wealth come from? I mean, he wasn't just very rich. He was buying $30 and $40 million homes in New York City and West Palm Beach and that private island and flying around on private jets. I mean, he was living like a multi-billionaire, even though there's nothing ever known that he really did that would give him that kind of wealth.
Did y'all hear some of the ways that he got money? In 2008, his Zorro Trust Company won the lottery. The latest Powerball jackpot winner didn't make Jay Flink's job easier. A financial planning company based in Oklahoma City received $29.3 million Monday on behalf of the Zorro Trust, which held the winning ticket from the July 2nd drawing. Since 1993, the Epstein Trust has state lease agreement for grazing cattle on public lands near his mansion, New Mexico State Commissioner said. His Zorro Ranch. Epstein purchased Zorro Ranch in 1993. Epstein controlled the property through a shell company called Zorro Trust. And they just happened to win almost a $30 million lotto. You don't think the lottery's fixed to give the money who they want to give it to? Diverting money? Here's another way he got money. From Reuters, June 23rd, 2023. Jeffrey Epstein got $300 million tax breaks paid U.S. Virginia Islands police, J.P. Morgan says. So here's Trump, who flew on the plane with two of his wives. We heard about what him and Melania did the first time on the plane. He flew on the plane with his second wife, Marla Maples, and their young daughter, Tiffany Trump, a couple of times. But Trump said he barely even knew Jeffrey Epstein.
Tape in the NBC archives of a Mar-a-Lago party shows Trump giving Epstein his personal attention. The footage, shot in November of 1992, before Trump opened the resort as a club, shows the future president surrounded by cheerleaders for the Buffalo Bills and Miami Dolphins, capturing Trump's fun-loving bachelor lifestyle for an appearance on Faith Daniels' NBC talk show.
We're going to get great ratings in your show.
Trump is surrounded by women as music blares in the background. After a while, Trump goes to greet three new guests, among them the financier Jeffrey Epstein.
Come on in, go inside.
More than a decade before his guilty plea on state prostitution charges. Later in the footage, Trump is seen talking to Epstein and another man as women are dancing in front of them. Trump alternates between dancing and pointing out women to Epstein and the other man and telling Epstein about the cameras. Though exactly what they say is difficult to understand as they discuss the women and their appearances, Trump gestures to one and appears to say to Epstein, "Look at her back there. She's hot." And then Trump says something else into Epstein's ear that makes him double over with laughter. But as the president says now, he never liked Epstein.
I was not a fan of his. That I can tell you. I was not a fan of his.
A tape in.
Then this is from July 23rd, 2020. Trump claims not to be following Ghislaine Maxwell's case despite long ties with Epstein. A spy and a publisher. Before Ghislaine Maxwell, there was her father, Robert, whose life reads like a thriller novel. Ghislaine Maxwell comes from a family dominated by her father. The father's life reads like a novel, having variously been suspected of working for British, Israel, and Soviet secret services. And Trump was claiming to reporters that he was not following the case, even though he has a long relationship with them, and even brought his children around them. This guy actually brought his kids around Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Trump's old photo viral. But did Donald Trump ever take his kids to Epstein? According to reports, Donald brought his son Eric, who was then 11, onto a flight with Epstein and his girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell. The Trumps flew with Epstein and Maxwell aboard a Grumman Gulfstream II private jet from Palm Beach, Florida. And y'all remember during the campaign, this last campaign, he used Epstein's plane, but said he didn't know it was Epstein's plane? 9 months ago, Donald Trump used Jeffrey Epstein's former jet plane for campaign appearances. The ex-president used the late convicted sex offender's plane after his own jet developed engine problems. Donald Trump used a plane that was once owned by Jeffrey Epstein and the late disgraced financier and convicted sex offender to fly to several presidential campaign events last weekend, it has been reported. The former president flew on a Gulfstream G550 jet whose previous ownership was subsequently traced to Epstein after Trump's own private plane, a Boeing 557 known as the Trump Air Force One, encountered engine troubles. So Trump rented a plane that used to be owned by Jeffrey Epstein? He claimed not to be following the case of Ghislaine Maxwell, whose father was British, Israeli, and Soviet intelligence. This is from the Independent. Trump, Epstein, and Weinstein in the 90s. At the turn of the century, David Jones was in the thick of the political galas and celebrity parties in New York and LA. He tells Claudia Joseph how it gave him a unique insight into the movers and shakers of that era, some of who would go on to hold the highest positions in the land. So there's Trump, Harvey Weinstein. October 4th, 2022. Trump asked aides if Ghislaine Maxwell had mentioned him after her arrest. So here we've got him handpicking Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, who had amassed a faithful following of Trump loyalists, and Trump taps them both to be the head of the FBI that would be the ones releasing the information on Epstein. And then they've done a about face on it and said it was a suicide. Don't look at anything else. Then Ghislaine Maxwell's father was British and Israeli and Soviet intelligence, and they're saying that they were probably compromised. And then Trump wants to know if Ghislaine Maxwell mentioned him after her arrest. Now, y'all imagine if y'all might have did something a little bit illegal for entertainment purposes only, hypothetically, and maybe one of your co-conspirators got caught, and you're going to tiptoe up to that conversation. Hey, did John Brown say anything about me when he got arrested? To see what beans have been spilled on you? Why would Trump be worried if she mentioned him after she got arrested? The arrest of notorious pedophile Jeffrey Epstein longtime associate Ghislaine Maxwell left former President Donald Trump anxious that she might raise his name to investigators or the press, according to a new book by New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman, with the Independent obtained ahead of publication. In Confidence Man, The Making of Donald Trump and the Breaking of America, she writes that then President's mind became occupied by a July 2020 story in the New York Post about Ghislaine Maxwell's arrest on sex trafficking charges. The Post reported, according to Page 6 gossip column, quoted an associate of Epstein, who hanged himself, as describing Maxwell as believing herself to be protected by the intelligence community she and Epstein helped with information, by Prince Andrew, by President Clinton, and even by President Trump, whom the Epstein associate described as having been very well known to be an acquaintance of her and Epstein. According to Ms. Haberman, Mr. Trump queried his advisors about the Post story during a meeting in the Oval Office, asking, "You see that article in the Post today that mentioned me?" After his aides reacted with silence, Mr. Trump pressed them further about Ghislaine Maxwell, who was at that moment a prisoner in the custody of the Department of Justice. "She say anything about me?" he asked. Why would he be so concerned? Jeffrey Epstein introduced a 14-year-old to Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Ghislaine Maxwell trial testimony reveals. An underage victim of Jeffrey Epstein testified Wednesday that she competed in Donald Trump's teen beauty pageants in the 1990s after being introduced to the former president by the notorious sex offender. The revelation emerged during the accuser's second day of testimony at Ghislaine Maxwell's trial for grooming underage victims for Epstein's abuse in 1994 to 2004. "Mr. Epstein introduced you to Donald Trump?" Maxwell's lawyer asked the witness, who testified using the pseudonym Jane. "Correct," she responded. Trump and Epstein partied in the same social circles in the 80s and 90s, but had a falling out in the early 2000s over a real estate dispute, according to reports. She testified she was 14 years old when Maxwell and Epstein first approached her at a Michigan summer camp in 1994. She alleged they groomed her for months before revealing their perverted intentions. Epstein and Maxwell forced her to participate in what she described as orgies throughout her teenage years. I was abused pretty much every time I would go over to his house, and it all started to seem the same after a while, whether it was just him or there were other women involved or me and Jeffrey and Ghislaine, it all started to seem the same, she said. After a while, you just become numb to it. Then Trump wished Ghislaine Maxwell well after she was arrested. Donald Trump on Ghislaine Maxwell, I wish her well. Asked about case, President says, I just wish her well, frankly. He's trying to keep that all civil, not wanting to make her mad. Donald Trump has bestowed his good wishes on Ghislaine Maxwell, who faces federal charges for allegedly enabling the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking of minor girls. At a press conference ostensibly to discuss the coronavirus crisis gripping the U.S. on Tuesday, Trump took questions from reporters, one of whom asked about Ghislaine Maxwell's recent arrest and whether she might implicate some of powerful men who formed part of Epstein's jet-set social circle. I don't know. I haven't really been following it too much. After he asked his staff, did she mention me? I just wish her well, frankly, Trump responded. I have met her numerous times over the years, especially since I lived in Palm Beach, and I guess they lived in Palm Beach, but I wish her well, whatever it is. I'm sure it's heavily redacted. a hand-picked cleanup crew.
Said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself. You want me to get, I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
Look, and this is how Dan Bongino walked away from his podcast. It's a lot to walk away from. Don Bongino chokes up on air announcing his plan to exit radio. Former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino choked up during Monday's broadcast. It says, let me find that part. I got a call from the president, and he couldn't have been nicer. Obviously, I'll keep the content between us, but I think you get the gist of what it was about. This is now real. So Dan Bongino, who was a Secret Service agent who protected his president, Obama and Bush, gets a call from President Trump to be his assistant deputy FBI director.
I'm really just a little bit overwhelmed. Because, with the show and all the clips and having everybody here, it's the energy kind of just distracts you from the reality of, what's about to happen. And it really hit me this morning. I want you to know how much I love you guys. I mean that. People throw that term around, but I really love you guys. I feel like I've met so many of you. Some of you I've never even seen, whether it was Eric or Jeremy on the radio show. I chose early on to interact with my audience in kind of a different way, and it's paid me back so many dividends. And there's nothing more incredible than going out at a book signing and someone goes, hey, how'd that treat you gave Lucy the other day work out? And you're like, how'd you know that? Like, you said it on the radio. I'm like, I did? Like, the relationship seems so asymmetric at times. Like, you know about me, but I don't know about you. But I know all I need to know about you, which is you've been there for me when I needed you. And to walk away from this was, I promise you, was not easy. But I absolutely know that this was the right thing to do. I've told you over and over, but that measure the effectiveness of what you do in your life by how people who stand and tell you to stop react. And the reaction has been exactly what I expected. I promise you this, I'm going there with a clear mission in mind. I go there with a clear head. This was done for the right reasons. And I am really, really, really going to miss doing this and being here with you every day. Let me tell you first my story and what I could tell you about Jeffrey Epstein from an unimpeachable source. The alarm went off. It says order food. I got to remind myself to order food all the time. It's like ridiculous. I forget. Jeffrey Epstein, a friend of mine, let's say, in a line of work I was in, was one time on a plane with Jeffrey Epstein. And Jeffrey Epstein and Bill Clinton were on that plane. And Bill Clinton was on that plane with some women who appeared to be very young at the time, which I found quite interesting. This story was told to me by an unimpeachable source. So I think Jeffrey Epstein may have some videotape of people central to the Democrat and maybe Republican Party doing some things, let's just say, they shouldn't be doing. Joe, are you picking up what I'm putting down here?
Yeah, unsavory actions, yes.
Unsavory. Very well said, Joe. So
President Trump just tapped a very unconventional choice for a key post over at the FBI. Dan Bongino, the former Secret Service agent turned right-wing media personality, will serve as deputy director. Brian Todd has more on the story for us. Brian, Bongino will wield significant power in his new job.
An enormous amount of power. Wolf would be running the Bureau's day-to-day operations. But Bongino's lack of experience at the FBI and his media background have raised concern among former agents. President Trump now has two of his most loyal MAGA champions heading the FBI. Kash Patel as director, and now 50-year-old Dan Bongino, a former Secret Service agent turned right-wing podcaster, as deputy director.
Both who swore they were going to get to the bottom of the Epstein thing if they had the ability to do so, and both have changed their tune. And here's Dan Bongino saying Trump called him. Trump handpicked him. He got a call from Trump.
I got a call from the president, and he couldn't have been nicer. Folks, it's a lot to walk away from.
And a lot to walk into, according to former FBI officials who spoke to CNN, who believe the hiring of Bongino will be controversial.
4 days ago, from the Hill, the FBI's Kash Patel and Dan Bongino face struggle. FBI Director Kash Patel and Deputy Director Dan Bongino are facing scrutiny as they attempt to live up to their big promises regarding rooting out the deep state. And y'all, did y'all hear Kash Patel laughing when she said, you said? You hear him laughing?
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself. You want me to get, I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
Look, I wasn't even going to get into this story. The reason why I got into the story was to show y'all we will never get the truth on anything that they string people along on. How long's this been now? 5 years since he killed himself? We will never get the truth. It will always be cover up. No matter who says they're going to bring us the truth, they all get bought off. They all get blackmailed. They all brown nose. They all go along with the swamp. The people that say they're going to go in there and drain the swamp, they get compromised or blackmailed. So the only truth you are going to have in these crazy, deceptive days is following after Jesus. You cannot put your trust in a man. They will lie to you about what the coming digital ID is going to be. They will lie to you about the benefits of the digital currency, of a world religion, of bowing down to a man and giving him your allegiance. They will lie about everything. And the people you think you can trust, there's things about their lives that you don't understand. They are playing a different game than the average American even sees. So I just want to encourage y'all, do not put your trust in a man in these last days. Put your hope in God, because everything that they are saying to us, the benefits about vaccines, the benefits of real ID, the benefits about authenticating yourself, the benefits of passcodes, the benefits of a digital currency, all of it is a lie, and all of it is leading to rebellion against God. I just wanted to bring y'all this. Just watch where you put your trust. The Bible says, cursed is the man that puts his trust in the arm of the flesh, but blessed is he who puts his trust in the Lord. I love y'all. And just because somebody is holding up a Bible doesn't mean that they are sent from God. You will know them by their fruit. I love y'all. Thank you for watching. If you appreciate the ministry and the truth that I bring on this channel, would you prayerfully consider a love offering?